Hello, welcome to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. Okay, so one vegetable which is not in any group of sort of vegetables, it's really out there on its own, even though you know, there are sort of 200 varieties of it, is asparagus. And this video I just want to put together a few ideas and facts to help people with asparagus, because asparagus is one of the top vegetables to eat. It's full of all sorts of goodness, and it's a perennial vegetable, so it's pretty much a herb, to be honest with you. As soon as you get it established in the garden, you know, it's one of them things that will just keep growing every year. And so it's very easy. All you got to do is keep it weeded, and then you can just keep cropping it, so it's really easy. So, asparagus, just to give you a bit of history, it was once thought of as being in the lily family of plants. And also, it's also been thought in some places also being part of the allium family, so like onions and things like that. It's now been grouped into its own group of plants, really, which is called the Asparagaceae group of plants. And there's around sort of 200 species. Obviously, many of them we can eat. You know, they vary in size. The most common one is called garden asparagus. Some of them are grown as ornamental plants, but pretty much most of them are grown to you know, to eat. And it's not an overly complicated plant to grow. It is a perennial. It is an herbaceous perennial. So you know, it'll die down to the sort of ground level over the winter. You need to cut it sort of back, and then over in the spring it'll send up these shoots, which is the part that you eat. You cut them off when they're about kind of 6 inches long, and there's a whole manner of ways that you can eat or use asparagus in the kitchen or whatever. So to give you a better sort of idea, the one thing that asparagus is very rich in is glutathione, which is a substance which it's quite a strong deoxidizing agent, and it's really good to repair and promote healthy cell growth in the body. So it sort of fights cancer, it prevents cancer, it's really good at cell production, most certainly for you know, sort of birth defects and things like that. You know, it's really good for things like that. So that's one of the best things about asparagus. You know, that it's got this antioxidant quality which helps your body to repair itself, prevent cancer and all the rest of it. It's also very rich in vitamins. It's got vitamin A, vitamin B6, vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin K. It's also very high in folate, iron, copper, protein, calcium, and also it's very high in fibre as well. So it's a really good vegetable to eat, and it is quite delicious to eat. You know, there are various ways of eating asparagus, which I'm not going to go into today, but you know, it is a really nice vegetable. It's one of the earliest vegetables that you'll get in the garden. It typically comes out in sort of March, April, dependent on the weather. And you know, the sprigs come up, and you can harvest them every couple of days or so. They'll keep growing. Obviously, at a given point you need to stop and let the plant grow, otherwise it'll exhaust itself. But that's, you know, that's sort of asparagus. You know, it's quite a seasonal vegetable. It only lasts for sort of 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending on where you are. It's always in the spring, so it's one of your first vegetables. So what do all of these vitamins and minerals do for you? Obviously, apart from the cancer side of things, it's one of the top vegetables for neutralising cell damage. Also, it prevents the ageing of your skin. From a brain process point of view, it helps you maintain good brain process. It removes excess salt from the body, so for anything that's going to cause that, like high blood pressure or heart function, so cardiovascular. It's really good for that. I've already explained that it decreases birth defects. It also lowers the risk of depression. It prevents both kidney and bladder stones from forming, and also, rather than eating it, if you can make a paste out of it, it can also be applied to the skin because of these properties that it's got. And it will also repair any sort of blemishes on the skin, things like acne and things like that. It can be used for. So it is a really healthy vegetable. It's in the top 15 fruits and vegetables to eat out of them all. So and it is so easy to grow. How to grow it? So I'm going to show you a video after this of me planting some established plants in the garden just here. Just to explain, asparagus. Basically, the only way to propagate it or to multiply the plant is by seed, and it takes a little time to do this. So basically what you need to do is you collect the seed from the plant, dry it. The following year you plant those seeds, and then it takes around 2 to 3 years for the plant to get to a point where you can start to crop the spears or the stalks from it. That's a little bit too much time for some people. A lot of people haven't got that amount of patience. So what I suggest you do is to start yourself off, go and buy yourself some of the established rootstocks. Most garden centres will sell them, or you can get them online, and then plant them into the ground. And then they will, they'll already be established. For the first year, they'll obviously need to establish themselves in the ground you put them in. But after that, you'll be able to crop the asparagus. Ground preparation. Asparagus don't like wet ground. Don't be tempted to plant them anywhere that gets waterlogged, or if it's quite sort of heavy soil. What you need to do is prepare the soil. Same with everything. It's all down to ground preparation. So what you need is a good, well fertile and well draining soil. If your soil is a little bit cloggy or clay, what I would suggest is you put some things in there to improve it. Get some compost in there. Get some wood chip, get some gravel, sand, so it's all breaks up and it will drain properly. And then you want some goodness in there, so you don't need too rich, but you want the ground to be sort of quite fertile for it to grow. Obviously, because it's a perennial, it's going to be sitting in that ground for 5, 10, 15 years. So what you need to do is put plenty of good organic matter in the ground, and some good sort of fertile compost and stuff like that to get it established. And after that, it'll be able to support itself. What I tend to do with mine is put a mulch of wood chippings on the top every spring, and that just helps to keep the weeds down as a sort of weed suppressant. But that's pretty much all you need to do. As soon as you've got it established, you just leave it to it. Every year you crop away, and then you can eat your asparagus, and then just leave it then to grow, and then at the end of the year just chop it down, and then the following year you're there cropping again. So from a digging point of view, you never dig the ground again. So it's so it's a real low maintenance way of gardening, and and every year the crop just gets better and better and better. To propagate them, as I say, if you then want to grow from seed, it's going to take you 2 or 3, 4 years before you get to a plant that's big enough. So what you need to do is plant the seed the following year, and then the next year you pot it on and grow it a bit bigger, and then typically the second year you then plant that plant outside and then let it develop in the ground. But as I say, if you want to shortcut that, go to a garden centre and buy some roots. They can be a little bit expensive, so shop around, but you can find them. Just to dispel a few myths, farmers that grow asparagus are known to put salt on the ground. Like many perennial plants, asparagus is quite resistant to salt in the ground. It doesn't mind salt too much. No plant is absolutely immune to salt. So if you do put too much salt in the ground, you will kill or impair the asparagus growth. But if you put a small amount of salt on the ground to knock the weeds back, the asparagus will survive that. And in fact, if you go back far enough, asparagus actually is classed as like a beach plant. And it's originates from the sort of west coast of Europe, around the coastal areas. So that's kind of where it comes from originally. So it is quite used to kind of sea salt being in the air and on the ground. Having said that, salt tends to stay in the ground, so if you keep putting salt on the same piece of ground over and over again, the ground just gets more and more and more saturated with sodium chloride or salt, and at some point you will kill the asparagus. So my suggestion to you is don't put salt on your asparagus. Just weed it as normal. Try to disturb the roots the least amount as possible, and put a mulch on like I do in the spring and then every year, and that will not only feed the plant with carbon matter. There's not a lot of nutrient in wood chip, but what it will do is it'll give something for the worms to get a go at, which will keep the ground airy, because the worms will be, mixing the ground up, and also you won't get any sort of root damage, and it will protect the plant from frost. It'll keep the ground a little bit warmer, and therefore you'll get shoots a little bit earlier in the ground. So that's what I suggest. But asparagus, take it from me, asparagus is, as long as you've got patience, is an easy crop to grow. As I say, it's perennial, so it's just like rhubarb, if you like, where it'll die down to ground level, and then in the spring it'll shoot up again, and then you can sort of crop away. And as soon as you've got your rhubarb established, in exactly the same way, as soon as you've got your asparagus established, it'll just keep growing, and then you can just pick away at it. So the next few clips of me putting some asparagus roots in that I've managed to salvage from the garden, just to bring them down here, and that'll give you a good idea of how to plant them when you get your rootstocks online or whatever. Okay, so just a sort of quick additional note. These are the berries that you take off asparagus. Now, I picked these off my asparagus last year, and what I typically do every year is pick around, I don't know, 20 or 30 berries off the plant before I put it down. And inside the berry, all you need to do is just open up the berry, and what you'll see in each one of the berries, there'll be 3 or 4 little black seeds. I don't know if you can see them. There you go. So those black seeds, all you need to do is put the berries in a little pot like that in your greenhouse over winter. They will sort of ripen off in there, and then what you need to do in the spring is get the seeds out like I've just shown you, and then plant them into a bit of compost, and what you'll get is a plant like this form. And obviously this is died down, obviously, as I said, it's herbaceous, so the top has died off. But if you can see inside, obviously we're in spring at the moment, but if you can see inside there, you'll see that's the actual plant there, and you can see a little shoot. See a little shoot there just coming, so that'll be this year's growth. Now, the asparagus plant will spend its first year like that, and then it'll start to grow again. As soon as it starts to grow again, I'll cut all these old shoots off. These will just basically pull out, really. As soon as it starts to grow again, what I'll do is I'll repot that up, because what I'm trying to do is grow the roots. Repot that into a larger pot, probably something about 4 or 5 inches across, and as soon as it's grown up for the second year, so I've got a nice big pot, nice good root, the plant should come up to probably about 18 inches, 2 foot high the second year. As soon as you've done that, you can then plant that outside, and then the following year let it grow. Don't cut it at all, and then typically the third or the fourth year, depends on how you're getting on, you'll have spears coming out that are big enough to sort of cut and eat. Don't be too anxious to cut them all off the first couple of years. What you want to do is get the plant established and nice and strong. So what I would suggest is just take 2 or 3 spears off the first year, let the rest grow, get the plant stronger and stronger and stronger. But one mistake a lot of people make is they overpick too soon, and that will weaken the plant and potentially kill it. So after you spend a couple of years growing it, what you don't want to do is kill it. So all I'm suggesting is, after a couple of years you'll be able to plant it outside, and then as soon as it's established itself outside, then you'll be able to sort of start to pick it. So what I typically do is always have some on the go. So if any of my plants for some reason die or whatever, I've got some spares that I can drop back in, and just to keep the asparagus bush or sort of bed, if you like, going. And as soon as you've got them going, you're going to get plenty of berries every year, and you can make plenty of plants, so you can always put them back in, and you can increase the amount of asparagus plants you've got by doing that as well. So, you know, after a couple of years, there's no reason why, after you've got one bed established, you couldn't start off a second bed of asparagus plants and then, you know, increase your yield even further. Okay, so first on the menu for today is to improve the asparagus bed. Now, what I managed to get here, these are some asparagus plants that I actually dug up yesterday to put in here. As you can see, I've left a reasonable amount of earth on the roots. The reason for doing that is a number of reasons. One, obviously I don't want to damage the roots during the transport. Secondly, if there's any mycorrhizal fungi in the soil here, I'll be transplanting the spores of that along with the roots. So the one good reason for doing it this way is, you know, if you can transplant it from another area, if you can get some plants that way, then, you know, you've got all the, you know, you've got the roots are established, and also you've got mycorrhizal fungi in there, so these plants are going to get off to a really good start. So obviously we've already got some quite well established asparagus in here, and this is one of the main reasons why when you cut the asparagus down, you don't cut it too far down, so you can actually see where the plants are. Now, if you see here, you can see there's an asparagus plant there from last year. However, this kind of area here doesn't have any in, so all I'm going to do is take around 6 inches of soil off the top and then dig the ground over underneath. Position the asparagus plants into the hole, and I need to get them around sort of 3 or 4 inches below the surface really. Plant them in the ground, so you basically just covering the crowns over, and then all I need to do then is just put the topsoil back over them, and then they'll get off to a really good start there. So there's one area there that I can improve. I've got an asparagus plant here. As you can see, that's quite a well-established plant, but here, from around here all the way along to about here, that area there, the asparagus plants aren't brilliant. There are the odd one in there, but really the plants aren't that good. So what I'm going to do is take the top 6 inches off the ground, put that into the wheelbarrow, and then dig the ground over, get it all nice and loose so the roots can get into the ground, and then put the asparagus plants into the ground, and then again cover them with around 2 to 3 inches of soil so that they're nicely bedded in. I'm going to then firm the ground down just by sort of stepping on the ground, just to make sure that they're bedded in. I don't need to give them any nutrition as such. This ground's already reasonably fertile, so I don't want to give them too much, because asparagus don't like the ground to be overly rich, but they do like to have, you know, reasonably fertile ground, and I think this ground is more than fertile for them. So I'm not going to put any compost or anything into the ground when I do this, because I always mulch the ground, and that sort of puts goodness back in anyway. But I'll get on with doing that now. So what I'm going to do is basically take off the top 6 inches of ground really, and then dig over the ground, and then I'll show you me putting the roots in a moment. Okay, so that's the ground pretty much prepared. All I've done with a spade is dug out 2 or 3 spadefuls of earth, and then I've just gone along like that and loosened the ground up. Now obviously the one that you need to understand is asparagus are perennial plants. In other words, they're going to stay in this position for a number of years. So what you need to make sure is, if the ground is not clear, that you've got any perennial weeds out the way, so anything like bindweed or twitch grass or goose grass, anything like that, you need to make sure that the ground is you know, free of anything like that, because it's going to be almost impossible for you to get that out of the ground as soon as these establish themselves, unless you dig the asparagus out at the same time. So as you can see, the ground is nice and fertile, and it's nice and loose. The reason to get it nice and loose is you want the roots to have a reasonably good chance of getting themselves bedded into the ground, and also you want it nice and loose so that the worms get in, and we'll make plenty of activity in there to get them all established. And also asparagus don't like the ground to be too wet, and if the ground's loose, then the ground, obviously any moisture will drain straight the way through there. On that note, Also as well with asparagus, what you don't want to do is plant it anywhere that's wet, because they won't like the ground if it's too wet. So if you have got wet ground, try and elevate them out of the ground, so build them on a ridge, so like you do with potatoes, build a ridge and then plant them on top of the ridge, or improve the drainage of the soil by adding sharp sand or gravel to it, and then that'll improve the drainage. But this, I've found that they grow quite nicely here, so all I'm going to do is just carry on planting. So now I've got that prepared, and that's nice and level, and that's about at the right height. Obviously when the ground settles they will sink slightly, but that's not going to sink too much, so that's just about right. So all I need to do now is place the roots onto the ground. Now you can see here that's one plant here, so there are the roots to that. So obviously I don't want to go any further than that, so I'll just place the asparagus plants in. So here's the first one, and obviously there's the top of the plant. Those are the shoots from last year, and what I want to do is get that so it's just below sort of ground level. So what I'm going to do is just make a bit of a hole there, because obviously there's a bit of a lump underneath there. I want to get that. Ideally, if you've got the room, I would say space these plants this big, probably around a foot or even possibly further apart than that, if you can. But because I've got limited room here, I don't want to put them too far apart. I'd rather get them all in, because I'm not going to plant these anywhere else other than here, so I want to put them a little bit closer than that. These are going to be about a foot or so apart. So that's the first one. Obviously spread the roots out. Now the plant will throw out more roots. Another important point that I've not mentioned yet is obviously if you dig plants up, what you want to do is get them into the ground as quickly as possible. I dug these up yesterday, and obviously I'm going them in today. So make sure the weather forecast is reasonable before you dig them up, because you all prepare the ground ready for them to go into before you go and fetch them. So that's the first one. I'm going to put another two here. Okay, now this one is this one's quite big again, so I'm just going to slot that in there. And I'm just going to put, really there's two plants there to be fair, I think there's actually two crowns. I'm just going to put one more in there, and if anything that's possibly overcrowding them a little bit, but I've got limited room to get them in, so I'm just going to put one more about there. Okay, so that one's a reasonably small one, and I can tell that's the top there, because that's where the shoot comes out there. So I'm just going to bed that in. Now, as you can see, the roots have gone out reasonably flat. Asparagus roots don't go particularly deep, they go outwards as opposed to down. Obviously some of them do go down, but they don't tend to have too much of a tapping root as it was. The roots go out more than anything. So all I need to do now is put the soil back over the top, making sure that all of the roots are covered, and then they can bed in. So I'll just put some soil on the top. Okay, now I've got that much soil on. I am going to put a bit more on in a minute. What I want to do with my hand, make a fist and just gently push the soil in. Now what you're doing more than anything is making sure that all the roots are in contact with the soil. So you just want to do that to make sure that it's all in contact with the soil like that. With the other stone there. And now what I'm going to do, now I've done that, is just very gently, not with my entire weight, just put a bit of weight on my foot like that. I don't want to compress the soil, I just want to make sure that the plants are firmly in there. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of water on a little bit of further soil over the top of there like that, and that's then planted.
Okay, so I'm just going to do some more, as I said, from here up to around here, which I think is just about off camera. Just so I can show you what I'm doing. All I'm doing is put the spade into the ground. I know I'm slightly off shot here. Let's do it up here so you can actually see. All I'm doing is putting the spade into the ground like that. Obviously what I want to do is get the asparagus in the middle of this border. The reason I'm using a spade is there may well be asparagus roots that I'm digging up. In fact, I think I've just, yeah, so there's one. So there's a youngish asparagus plant which I've dug up. So that can go back in a moment. But all I'm doing is going into the side. I know the asparagus plant's up the middle, you see, so if I go to the side of it, if I do inadvertently dig an asparagus plant up, you know, I can always put him back in after. So, right. So now what I need to do get plenty of soil there, because what you want to do pretty much is knock some of the topsoil into the bottom, if that makes any sense. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. So I'll just get this out. Right, so what I'm doing now is knock some of the, see, I've got an asparagus plant there, so I want to leave that where it is. So knock some in like that. Now, talking of perennial weeds, there's a little bit of bindweed which is coming from the raspberries. So because I've got a perennial weed there, what I want to do is just dig in there a little bit more, make sure I've got all of this out. As you can see, it's like spaghetti here, and you only need to leave half an inch of this in and it'll start off again. So I'm just going to make sure I've got all of that out. It's actually under the path, so right. So that's all the binding out of the way. So all I'm doing now is just put the spade in like that, loosen the ground up, and then I'm ready to put some asparagus plants in. So I'm going to do the same further up. I'm just doing this bit to show you. So that's where it's going to start there. Make sure you've got about the right level, the ground. Then you can lay them in. So, okay, so that's it already. So the soil's nice and loose, so the root's going to be able to get into there. No perennial weeds in there, I hope. A little bit more bindweed there. So, again, just like we did before, there's the root. So I'm just going to bob that in there, like that. Make sure that all the roots are in and covered. A lot of these roots will probably die back, but it'll obviously shoot out some new ones. I'm going to put another one there. I'm keeping the plants in the middle as much as I possibly can. Now these plants are slightly smaller than the ones before. Obviously make sure you put them the right way up. I can see there where the shoot came last year. And I'm putting these, as I say, about 9 inches apart, and about just under ground level, so about 2 or 3 inches below ground level. So make sure you can get the roots in as best you can. And there's one big one here, which I'm just going to put into that hole there, like that. That's going to be better that way. Right, that's a little bit high, so all you need to do is just pull back the soil a little bit, make more of a hole for it to sit in. There you go. So that's going to sit in there quite nicely. Now here's the one that I dug out, so all I'm going to do is find a nice little spot for that one. Probably there will be okay. And these will quite happily grow. You know, I mean, if you think of the way these naturally grow, you know, the plant obviously sets seeds, so that's basically how they propagate. And you know, the seeds aren't going to fall too far away from the plants. Obviously a lot of them will be eaten by birds or whatever, but by and far the majority of seeds are going to fall on the ground, so they are quite happy growing with each other, if you like. So, and as my room is limited here, I can't spread them out too much, but ideally I would have planted these probably a bit further apart than I have here. Probably about one every, as I say, about every inch, 18 inches. So now all I need to do is go back, just like I did before, put some soil, obviously make sure that there's no weeds in there at all. I'm just sprinkling the earth back over the top, like that, making sure that all of the roots are in there. And obviously any soil that they've come with, also make sure that goes in there as well, because that's obviously the soil that they're used to. And there'll be mycorrhizal fungi and stuff like, you know, all the good stuff in that soil as well, all the spores in there to help it along. So just need a little bit more earth on there now. Like that. Now, just in exactly the same way as I did before, what I'm going to do now is push the ground down like that to make sure I get rid of all the air pockets, like that. You don't need to push it down too much, you haven't got to squash them in there. All you've got to do is make sure that there's no air gaps in there, and that they're in contact with the soil, which is going to keep the roots moist, but not too wet obviously. And the worms will now get in there. I mean, there's loads of worms, you can see them, they're everywhere. The worms are going to get in there and settle all this ground down for you, and obviously gravity will do its part as well. So that's pretty much it. I'm just going to put a little bit more earth on top of there, no more than ½ an inch or so, just to fill these holes here, because this will sink a little bit, because you can see it's slightly springy. So that'll be pretty much it. So all I'm going to do is basically just lightly tread it in like that, not too much. Obviously try not to damage the plants, so go round the plants, don't go on top of them. And then just make sure I've got no weeds in there. I'm not sure what that is, to be honest. It's not bindweed. So a bit more earth, and what you might need to do is in a couple of weeks' time, when these are bedded in and the ground's kind of sunk in, I mean, no doubt the rain that we're going to have in the next week or so is going to wash these in anyway. What you might need to do is come back and put a bit more earth over the top just to build up the level again. But basically you want the crowns ending up so they're just kind of sticking above the ground there, but the main crown is about 2 inches under the ground, if you like. So you have got some shoots just popping up like that, but the main crown is around 2 or 3 inches under the ground. Okay, so now I've got them all on the ground. Obviously what I want to do is just dress the top of the ground a little bit. Now this primarily is just to keep the weeds down, basically, so if I get any seeds on there they're not going to come through. But obviously with asparagus being a perennial vegetable, and obviously it's herbaceous, you know, it will grow quite quickly in the spring, so you know, any goodness that I can give it by sort of top feed will be ideal. Now all this is rotted down wood chippings, and this is really good stuff, really. So this is basically I bagged this up at the back end of the sort of beginning of last year. I just left it in the bag over the winter, and as you can see it's rotted down really well. What I did do is put some coffee in this to rot it down, and what that does is it enables the bacteria to thrive in there. And what this will do is it'll just keep the weeds down, and it'll stop the any sort of you don't want too much of this on, because what you don't want is for the asparagus to sit in wet ground. So if your ground is a little bit wet, I'd suggest you don't do this. But just by putting that top dressing on there, it puts a bit of goodness back into the ground, and also it'll mulch the top to stop any weeds from starting to grow in there. Okay, so there you go. So there's the finished bed. So obviously we've put some new asparagus plants in kind of here and at that top corner there, and then covered the whole thing with just a few inches of, a couple of inches of sort of wood chippings that have been rotted down for 12 months, and that will obviously mulch the ground. Now the birds absolutely love the wood chippings, because obviously there's going to be worms in there. and they're going to be scratching around in there. So I wouldn't worry about making it too neat, because I can almost guarantee they're going to get in there and have a scratch around for worms and stuff, which is why I've got these boards up the front here, because they tend to kick it all over the path as well. But so if you do put any of this down, expect the birds, you know, the sparrows and the starlings, that, you know, they're going to get in there and scratch it around. So don't worry about it being too neat. You can always neaten it up at a later date. But obviously, as soon as the asparagus starts to grow, you're going to struggle to get this around the plants really. So now, whilst the plants are dormant, because the asparagus will be coming up in the next, I would imagine the next 2 or 3 weeks, you'll start to see the odd one coming through. So now really is the best time to mulch the ground, and that'll put a bit of goodness back in there, stimulate the worms and and all the other bits and bobs in there to get the asparagus growing really healthily. So that's the asparagus bed, ready, prepared for this year.
So I hope this episode was of some use to you. Please don't hesitate to put any comments or questions you've got below, and I'll always get back to you. And I'll see you on the next episode of Jim's Allotment Garden.